I'm going to talk a little bit about advocacy. Advocacy is actually, if not a science, it's a profession. And regrettably on the left, we are frequently woefully disorganized and unprofessional about our advocacy. And I am interested in the science or the empiricism or the practicum of how to get it better and better and better. We tend to have fewer resources on the left to do our campaigns than the right. We often have more foot soldiers, but far less money. And so the challenge on the left is frequently how you mobilize people effectively. Two different things. You can mobilize people ineffectively a lot. I'm going to tick off kind of the 5 crucial variables or stations of the cross towards successful advocacy. And this is true wherever you are doing it, whether you are trying to change the laws around crack cocaine sentencing disparities, whether you are trying to block a zoning change in your local community, whether you are trying to change people's minds about something but there isn't an actual public policy, regulatory or legislative. There are 5 crucial elements to all advocacy. Number 1, and frequently the hardest, that is the one in which people put the least rigor into, but is crucial, is your goal. What does success look like? How do you know you're done? Can those of you working on advocacy or public policy campaign agree and explicate, enumerate as precisely as possible what does success look like? It's not just crucial as an organizing vehicle so that when people following you inevitably come to that moment in public policy where there's a compromise offered to you and people crumble because the compromise seems incredible. How could we do that? Your willingness to articulate right up front why are we in this is crucial. Second, who's the audience that is most likely to deliver the success I've just named? Is it a judge? Is it a city council? Is it the editorial board of the significant newspaper in my community? Is it the Congress? Is it the American people? Is it my deacon board? Whatever it is, who's my audience? There are generally many audiences on a complicated public policy issue, and so frequently we're talking about a hierarchy of audiences. But a willingness to enumerate exactly who we're talking to. 2A, do we have the research? Do we have the empirical data or the qualitative data that tells me what that audience already knows or thinks about what I want them to do? A crucial vulnerability in public policy and advocacy and communications, particularly for those of you who are quite powerful within your own institution. When you step outside of it, a crucial problem in advocacy is, I'll say for lack of a better term, the narcissism of success. I know how to talk about this, and maybe you do. But in advocacy, we ask a different question. How does my audience process what I'm saying? And that's very different. So I've got a defined goal. I've got some analysis of the audience that were they to do what I want them to do would bring me that goal. The most opaque, what separates the girls from the women, the men from the boys, is a strategy. When I say strategy in advocacy, I mean a statement, and I will stick with English, a statement in English of the intellectual underpinning of the effort, a description of how we're going to organize ourselves that we guess, done well, will maximize the possibility that the audience we've defined will do what we want them to do. the vast majority of efforts, I shouldn't say the vast majority, an unfortunate number of efforts move forward without an articulable strategy. There are good tactics, there are bad tactics. But when I say strategy, I mean an intellectual underpinning. Are we going to win with volume? We're just going to overwhelm them. That would be AARP's advocacy strategy. It's volume. Are we going to rely on, in a commodified culture, money? Good luck. Are we going to rely on, is the logic of our effort shame? I once read about somebody who ran a campaign to minimize or reduce booty-shaking videos on BET. I wasn't involved in that, although I watched BET. I noticed the change. And so I wasn't involved in the strategy and the efforts of the effort, but from my vantage point, shame might have been described as the intellectual underpinning, the logic. Your willingness to have a strategy will be the dispositive variable. I'm going to use words like that because I heard ontological, heuristic. I'm going to your turn. 4, yes.
Very, very quick question on strategy. The intellectual underpinning of the effort.
Yeah.
Do you find it to be positive or negative if that intellectual underpinning is connected to an emotion?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It can be wonderful. It can be destructive too. It depends on the emotion. It depends on the audience.
Effective.
It depends on the audience, but generally speaking, in public policy, emotion is a beautiful component to strategy. Absolutely. If I'm trying to get my dissertation at the Gregor Mendel Peapod Hybridization Dissertation Committee, emotion probably is not a great strategy. So, but it depends on my audience. But generally in public policy, yes. Tactics. Tactics are what we do. It's the actual utilization, deployment of our resources, our time, our brand, our patrimony, our money, our support system. A triage system for tactics is connecting it to your strategy. You need to have adults around you who know your goal, know your audience, are with you on your strategy, and then they can help you say whether or not the tactic has a good nexus to the strategy, and is it worth the time. The absence of a strategy is what makes all of your public life incredibly inefficient, because people fight about tactics without this frame. And so then you're just fighting about raw power. And who decides? Last, and some people say this isn't a fifth thing, you can make the argument what I'm about to say is not a fifth thing, but it's the marble through the meat of the other 4. Sorry for you vegans. Communications. Communications used to be a thing, used to be the privilege of the very rich. Worrying about sophisticated communications. It would be the first thing to be jettisoned if we didn't have the money for a campaign. You know, we need a communication. Oh, well, we can't afford it. Life is much too complicated. The Tower of Babel, which is the internet, which is cable, which is radio, you cannot have an effective advocacy effort without sophisticated communications. Doesn't mean you have to have Porter Novelli do it, but you cannot be that stubborn person that thinks, I got this. Again, communications, I said earlier, communications means an understanding of how the audience you're trying to move hears things, particularly the thing you want to say. Sophisticated communications, well paid for communications, modern communications is so advanced that it's happening to you without you thinking about it. And your willingness to participate in that and to be vibrant and excited about getting help. Media training, language, values. Here's a basic one that I learned in doing focus groups for a client years ago. In public policy, generally speaking, men and women, generally speaking, men and women process things wildly differently. How? Men have an extreme difficulty personalizing things around public policy. Women insist on it. By that I mean, healthcare, Obamacare, blah, 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 blah. You talk to men and women in a focus group or in any setting, you will ask a man a direct personal question. Do you know anybody? Have you ever had a problem with insurance turning you down for a pre-existing condition? It's an outrage that insurance companies, that's the man. A woman, you'll say to a woman, do you think there ought to be a law that bars insurance companies from denying pre-existing? And a woman will say, my aunt. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, but the exceptions are so few. And so sophisticated people who do public policy speaking first look at their audience. But when you can't look at your audience, when you're on television or when you're speaking to everybody, they elide back and forth between the personal and the policy because you capture people. You're getting to this. I'll stop. That's the basic outline that we rely on for supporting the design of an advocacy campaign. It's exciting. It is efficient. It works. When you take the time and exercise your normal rigor, as much time as you put into a sermon, into thinking before you launch an effort about these steps, and working with people who will test you and push you, or agree with you, will make the campaign more vibrant. Will make those who support you more connected to why they support you. Will help you get language to move people in more efficient ways. I'll stop there and open it up to questions or concerns. I love what we do. I am extremely excited to watch what you all are thinking about doing in whatever structural direction it goes, in whatever tactical deployment you decide as a group and as a larger group, as I'm sure this will grow. The nation needs you. The nation needs you. We have so many pressing problems. We need your voice. We need the people who follow your leadership. We need you to push your friends. We need you to oppose your enemies. We need you.